The NFC playoffs, I think if they're whole and they're healthy, it's the Saints. I think they've been the team that looked like the best team in the conference pretty much all year. They lost a couple games at the beginning of the year, but they got on a big roll. The problem the Saints have is that they lost to the Jalen Hurts Eagles on Sunday, and now they're not in the top seed anymore. And as you guys know, only one team per conference gets a bye in the playoffs this year. Now, if they don't somehow pass the Packers, they're going to have to play an extra game, whereas the Packers only have to play two. And that stuff matters. There's no question about it. Green Bay has the tiebreaker. They beat them earlier this year. So the Saints are going to have to do something like beat the Chiefs this week in order to get back into that top seed, or else they have their work cut out for them. But, I mean, line up the teams on paper, everything else equal, I would say the Saints look like the toughest team in the NFC.
When you look at it, who needs it? Who needs that bye more in the AFC? Is it the Steelers or the Chiefs?
Well, I think right now you would have to say the Steelers because they're reeling a little bit, right? They've lost a couple in a row. They don't have the run game going. There's a lot of issues there in Pittsburgh that you'd look and say 3 weeks from now, that's a team that could use a week off to reset itself. Whereas Kansas City, obviously they have that championship from last year. They have all kinds of confidence. Haven't been pushed really, really all that hard except by the Raiders, who may not end up getting in. So, I think Pittsburgh would benefit more from the bye week than Kansas City. Well, I mean, obviously either team would love to have it, but I think Pittsburgh looks like the team that needs it more because right now they don't look like they're playing their best football of the year.
Same question for the NFC. Packers or Saints, who needs it more?
I think I would say the Packers because I think if you're looking at where the game is played, right? If you have a Packers Saints NFC Championship game, and if you're the Packers, you'd rather that game be in Green Bay, right, as opposed to New Orleans. And not I mean obviously with fans not being at the games, it's not as big a deal, in New Orleans as it might have been in past years, but the weather isn't going to be any nicer in Green Bay in January than it's been in past years. So that gives you the advantage. You have an indoor team coming to your place. Maybe that helps. So that's why I would say probably the Packers would benefit more from the one seed in the NFC than the Saints would because the Saints aren't going to have that usual, Saints crowd. Plus, I mean, I don't know. The Saints they've lost playoff home games the last couple of years, so maybe that would do them some good to be on the road. Who knows?
And last thing for you, Dan, we always talk about award season. Won't have that great gala the night before the Super Bowl, just another casualty of the coronavirus, like the Pro Bowl, but got to give the league credit. 100% of games to this point in the regular season have been played. But who do you think right now, in your opinion, from those you talk to and the way you follow the league, offensive and defensive players of the year to this point?
I think the offensive player of the year has never gone to a tight end, but Travis Kelce is currently leading the league in receiving yards, which no tight end has ever done. So give a look at his candidacy as a possible offensive player of the year. I mean, look, there's all kinds of candidates. Obviously, I mean, Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook at the running back position having dominant kind of years. Wide receivers like Devontae Adams and Stephon Diggs. I'm sure there are people I'm not listing who their fans are going to be upset with me. But I think the point about Kelce is worth watching because it would be historic to see a tight end win that award. But what Kelce's doing statistically is historic, so watch out for that. We talk about defensive player of the year. The overreactions column we brought up, could Chase Young get in that mix? Obviously, he looks like the front runner for defensive rookie of the year, and he seems to be getting about 3 weeks better every week. It's incredible to watch his development throughout the season, but he's going to have to overcome guys like T.J. Watt, Aaron Donald, who are up at the top of the sack leaderboard. Xavier Howard is leading the league in interceptions, so good races there, but I think it's interesting to watch and see if a tight end could break through and win it, and if a rookie could win it on the defensive end.
It'll be something we'll certainly keep an eye on. Dan Graziano joining this morning on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Dan, thank you very much.
You got it.
All right, Key, I got to hit you with this because it's a little bit strange. So explain this to me as a guy that caught a ton of balls and was one of the better offensive players of your era. Last year, and this is something that Dan got into, and we're going to get into this a little bit more with your offensive and defensive players, you and Jay's coming up in just a bit. Last year, the NFL MVP, you look at a guy and you say, all right, this one's easy. It's Lamar Jackson. He's the unanimous MVP, only the second unanimous MVP in league history. Yet the offensive player of the year last year in the NFL was nepotism. Key's nephew, Michael Thomas. Help me square that. Lamar Jackson is the unanimous MVP because he is crazy good on offense, but your nephew, also crazy good on offense, is the offensive player of the year. I think it's great that both guys get a chance to be in the spotlight, win some hardware, but as an offensive player, doesn't it sort of stand to reason that one of those guys should win the award? It almost feels like Lamar should have won both, with all due respect to Michael. Is it a little bit weird?
You know, they just, receiver-wise, it's hard to get the MVP, right? Just like it is at the running back spot. The quarterbacks touch the ball, 40, 50 times a game, depending on what the offensive flow is. And so the opportunities are there for them more. It's a snack, crackle, pop league. They want to be able to showcase the quarterback position. Wide receiver, that's why that award is there for the offensive player of the year, whether it's a running back or a wide receiver or a tight end. The MVP conversation is certainly almost always is going to be a quarterback. Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson, Tom Brady. The last player that was not an offensive player to win the league MVP was who?
Jerry Rice.
No, offensive player that was not offensive player was Lawrence Taylor.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's it.
I was going to mention that Jerry Rice was only the second. So Thomas joins Jerry Rice as the only two wide receivers to win Offensive Player of the Year. Sorry, I didn't hear you there offensively and defensively, but that also goes to show just how difficult it is to win at key at a dependent position when Jerry Rice and Michael Thomas are the only two wide receivers to win Offensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, it typically goes to, a quarterback or running backs, and an MVP goes typically to a quarterback.
We'll see. It's that old discussion, the age-old discussion. The most valuable player versus the best player, and we'll get the fellas' thoughts on that in just a second. But same thing, but you heard Ed Werder there, our longtime Cowboys reporter. I mean, look, they have a better chance to get a top 5 pick than they do to make the playoffs, and they are tied for the fewest wins in the entire NFC with Atlanta and Carolina. And dare I say, the Cowboys had grander expectations than both of those teams. Dan Graziano, the NFL insider, joins us this morning on Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Okay, Dan, if I hear it from the number 1 and number 2 guys in the organization that Mike's going to be back, I guess he's going to be back. But when I just roll the numbers out there, any chance there could be a change of heart, especially if it gets even worse than it is right now?
I mean, it can only get, 3 games worse, right? That's all they have left. So, look, I don't think anybody's under any illusions there about coming back and winning the division and making a Super Bowl run. So, no, look, if this was the guy they hired last year, there's no reason to think they're just going to go off of it after 1 year. He's never done that before. I think 2 years is the shortest tenure in Cowboys coaching history under Jerry Jones. I think it was Chan Gailey. But no, I mean, look, they believe McCarthy was the right choice. They're disappointed how the year's gone. Could you see a change at coordinator, like defensive coordinator? Yes, absolutely. That's entirely possible. But no, I don't see them going back on their decision to hire Mike McCarthy after just 1 year. There just doesn't. There's nothing in their history to indicate they would consider that, and I think we can take them at their word.
Dan, I know you got something for me on the Giants. How much discussion has been put in with the New York Giants on going back to Colt McCoy versus Daniel Jones for this weekend?
It doesn't sound to me like Joe Judge has any regrets about running Daniel Jones out there. Unless he had a setback health-wise and he was less healthy this week than last week, I would be very surprised if they changed the plan. If anything, the hamstring is getting better, and maybe they have reason to believe he'll be able to be more effective this week. But as of now, I don't think that they're ready to go back to Colt McCoy. We could hear something different. They get out on the practice field today. Maybe he's not able to do much, but from everything I've been told, the plan would be to do what they did last week and ideally have Daniel Jones even healthier than he was then.
You said in your weekly reaction column this week that it's an overreaction to say that Mitch Trubisky will be the starter in 2021. Why is that?
Well, I think what's interesting about Trubisky is, he seems to be in the midst of a hot finish and could continue that. And, you wonder if a guy his age, who was the number 2 pick in the draft, might have some appeal to teams as a potential starter next year, and that's why we kind of threw that into the overreaction column. But I think the point I was trying to make was teams aren't necessarily as desperate at quarterback as they were a couple of years ago. Most of the teams, maybe 2/3 of the league, kind of knows who its quarterback is going to be next year. So I think Trubisky might find a home somewhere, but I don't know that he's going to be somebody that people look at just based on a good December and say, hey, he's all fixed. Let's bring him in and make him our starter. I think if he's on a team next year, which I think he will be, it's probably as like a backup / project kind of player, and maybe with a team that thinks he has a future. But I think what's happening in Chicago here is he's making the case for himself heading into free agency, and maybe somebody takes a shot on him. But I wouldn't list him as a potential starter, week 1 starter anywhere next year, just based on this.
Dan, you also said in your